You're on mute, Jane.
I know, I'm just waiting for Lynn. Right, we're going live now, Councillor Iqbal.
Okay. Can I, first of all, welcome everybody, ladies and gentlemen, to this virtual Policy and Resources Committee meeting for June. Due to the COVID-19 situation, we are still meeting virtually as a council. So I'll explain in terms of the meeting and how the format will be. But just before I move on, I just want to do a roll check of all councillors first, and then I've got members of the public that have indicated they wish to speak. So I will give their names as well. So if I call your name out, if you can just unmute yourself and just confirm that you're here, please. Nadeem Ahmed.
Present.
David Clegg.
Present.
Sarah Coburn Price.
Yes, here.
Okay. Mike Goldthorpe.
Present.
I'm obviously present. Brian Newman.
Present.
Thank you. David Whip.
Here.
Thank you. Zafar Ali.
Present.
Thank you. Mohammed Aslam. Mohammed Aslam, if you're on mute, you need to unmute yourself.
I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Rosemary Carroll.
Here.
Thank you. Colin Carter.
Present.
Thank you. Mohammed Saqib.
Present.
Thank you. And then last by no means least, Yvonne Tennant.
Councillor Iqbal, just before... Oh,
Yvonne. Yvonne, can you hear us? Is she showing on your system, Jane?
yeah, she's muted. Yvonne, you're muted.
Right. It keeps going back to muted. Yeah, I'm here.
That's fine. Thank you. Go on, Jane. I'm just going to check members of the public. But
Yeah, Councillor Ken Turner is also present. It's not a member of the committee, but he's present to speak.
that's fine. Welcome, Ken. And then in terms of members of the public that have asked to speak, some of you had indicated that you're here. I just want to check that you're still with us. Richard O'Brien.
Here.
Thank you, Richard. Is John England with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you, John. Robert Oliver.
Yes, I'm here.
Thanks, Robert. Bill Fulster.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Mark Sugden.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Welcome. And finally, Deborah Smith.
Yes, present.
Thank you. Right. In terms of the meeting, I'm just going to rejig the agenda slightly after the minutes. But before I do that, for councillors' benefit, when it comes to speaking, you should have a toolbar on your screen. If you're on an iPad or a laptop, or if you dialed in via your mobile phone, that indicates that you want to speak. So if you just raise your hand, if you're able to, and then I know that you're wanting to come in on a particular item. If you don't have that facility, if you then just shout out your name, please, then at least I know that you're wanting to speak. But before you speak, if you just indicate who you are, then at least people that are watching this meeting know which councillor's speaking. And then once you've spoken, if I can ask you to put yourselves on mute, please. That way there's no interference in terms of the meeting, if everybody's okay with that. Item 1 on the agenda is declarations of interest. Is there any councillor who's got a declaration of interest to declare? No, I'm getting a stunned silence. Thank you. In terms of the minutes of the last meeting held back in March, I'm happy to move those as a correct record.
Second then.
Thank you very much, Nadeem. Is there anybody against those minutes? No. Okay. Where I'm going to rejig the agenda is that Deborah Smith has a much more, if not equally important item to attend to, and she's asked to speak first, that she needs to go and organise a birthday party for a child. So I'm going to bring forward the application for High Lane Salterford, which was a late addition at the weekend, which councillors should have had through the post. I'm going to bring that forward as the next item. And Deborah, if you unmute yourself, you've got up to 5 minutes in which to address the committee. And once you've addressed the committee, if I can ask you to mute yourself, and then if councillors have got any specific questions to ask of you, they'll indicate that. So Deborah, if you want to unmute yourself, the floor's yours for 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for bringing the item forward as well. This proposal is the idea of a local resident, Mr. Dan Clamp, who lives next to the application site. Mr. Clamp has already converted the former pumping station adjacent to the application site to 3 houses, and the quality of his work is clearly evident in this development. With his partner, he also owns and operates a Grade 2 holiday cottage in Barnoldswick, so they have first-hand experience of the business and understand why people choose to holiday in Pendle. Aspiring to the same high-end finish as the former pumping station and the Grade 2 holiday cottage, his vision is to develop 26 luxury lodges using materials quarried on site and sourced locally. Visitors would be able to buy or rent a lodge and enjoy the benefits of this attractive countryside location with access to walking, cycling and horse riding nearby. High-end tourism-related developments such as this can make a positive contribution towards Pendle's image and its overall tourism offer. This proposal is very different from a static caravan site or a typical holiday lodge development. My client's aim is to offer something different for visitors at the higher end of the market to broaden the range of holiday accommodation available in Pendle. The lodges are architect designed and purposely designed for the Pendle climate, with covered balconies and internal gardens for some of the lodges to account for the location's occasionally wet weather. The materials and colours used would blend into the site and its surrounding. There is no objection to the proposal from your officers on the grounds of landscape and visual impact. If you manage to visit the site, you'll know that the site is fairly well tucked away into the landscape, with existing and new planting providing more than adequate screening of the development. We've worked with officers to amend the scheme following a previous refusal for the application. So we've relocated the reception building, which has been a sticking point in discussions. It's now been reduced in size and repositioned towards the back of the site. We've also nudged the single-storey lodges closest to the quarry away from the quarry in order to ensure that additional trees can be retained. The proposal now has the support of officers and is recommended for approval. Whether visitors choose to buy or rent, location is an important determining factor in choosing a holiday destination. There's been some criticism of the location because of High Lane, but the location is part of the site's appeal. Visitors will enjoy fantastic views in this part of Pendle. It should be noted that there's no technical objection from LCC Highways to the access or the use of High Lane. Tourism-related traffic is not the same as residential traffic, which peaks early in the morning and peaks at the end of the working day. Just to finish. At a time when people are increasingly looking for a staycation in the UK, this kind of offer is ideally placed to meet this need and would make a positive contribution to Pendle's tourism offer, creating a benchmark for good design and high quality development in the tourism sector. It will create much needed local jobs in construction and spin-off trades when under construction, and permanent jobs whilst running the site. On this basis, I hope that you'll be able to support your office's recommendation. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Deborah, for your input there. Before I bring David Whip in, who's indicated to speak, do we have a planning officer, or is Neil on the call? Jane?
I'm on the call, Chairman.
All right, sorry, Neil. Is there anything that you need to add in terms of this, Neil, before I open it up for councillors?
Chairman, I would just be repeating what's in the report, so nothing to add to what's in there.
Fine. Thanks for that, Neil. Councillor David Whip, if you want to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got no questions for Deborah. I just wanted to make some comments. The area committee saw the first application for this site sometime last year. I can't just remember when, but it's more than 12 months ago, I think. And several of us went on a site visit, and the councillors that went on the site visit were very impressed with not only the quality of the proposal, but the quality of the work that had been done on the conversion of the old waterworks buildings. And this is, of course, a brownfield site with a largely redundant reservoir as part of it. There are reservations, and people have articulated the road has been a problem, which it is, and essentially the first application was turned down not because of highway grounds, but because of the impact on the landscape, and that it wasn't felt to be a sustainable location. Just thinking about the highway grounds for a start, my view is that the level of traffic generated by the proposed development would have a marginal impact on the amount of traffic on that road. It is a busy road. It's the one that goes over the tops and leads from Bonalswick through to Barrowford, and it's heavily trafficked by commuters joining the M65 at Barrowford. So there is concern about the number of vehicles on there. However, my balanced view is that it will be a very marginal impact, and also the busiest times of day for commuters will be different to those who are joining or attending the development. Just going back to the quality, one of the things that certainly impressed me and I think other members was the fact that it's not only local stone, it is stone that's actually been quarried from that location that's going to be used in the development. So the development will be very much part of the landscape. Some of us went across the valley and looked at the proposed development from Kelbrook, from the hillside at Kelbrook, and our view was that it would fit in very well. Now, the West Craven Area Committee has been stalemated on this, and we've at the last meeting we couldn't get a decision to either approve or turn it down, and I thought the best way to resolve the issue was to put it onto Policy and Resources and get a decision one way or the other. I think the applicants have been very patient because clearly COVID-19 interfered with it coming back to committee, and so they've lost several months with that. And it's on COVID-19 that I think in coming to a balanced decision about this application, we must take into account the impact that COVID-19 has had and is having on the local economy. I think the development that's proposed will bring people who spend money into our area, and it will help sustain local businesses. And quite frankly, they've taken a hammering. They need every help that they can get. I think the applicants have researched the market very well. In Salterford, which is where this lies, there are, well, we must have had probably a dozen applications for lodges and static caravans, caravan sites and the like. Of all those applications, this is head and shoulders above the rest, and one that I feel will be a positive benefit for the area and help to create spending for local businesses, create jobs, and on balance, taking into account that there are some downsides, I think it should be approved, and I would move that we do, subject to the conditions set out.
Okay, thank you very much for that, David. I'm happy to second the approval from the chair. I mean, I was passing through the area a couple of days ago and made a point of just going round to have a look and endorse everything that Councillor David Whipper said, and likewise the information that Deborah's provided. But no doubt councillors had some correspondence as well from the applicants over the weekend, and you know, on paper it looks quite an impressive application, and you know, certainly wish it all the success. So I'm happy to second that we approve the application. Is there any other councillors that want to speak? I can't see any other hands raised Oh, sorry, I've got Mike Goldthorpe. Mike, you're on. Mike,
So-
Mike,
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Mike Goldthorpe, Pendle Borough Councillor for Earby Ward. I think it's fair to say that the development per se is nothing particularly wrong with it. A great design, great location, other than the fact, according to the information we have in front of us, it is totally unsustainable. And not only that, the actual report says we're going to have a substantial increase in traffic. Now, I have a worry not about the actual site itself in particular, about the precedent that we set, that we have got a site which is totally unsustainable. There's no public transport. It's access to the local communities is not easily done by walking. There are quite a number of footpaths around about there, but at the end of the day, it is some distance. So that is the key for me, not the actual development per se. The fact that we say it is unsustainable. It does mean an substantial increase, according to the report we have in front of us, of vehicle traffic. And we do know, as Councillor Whip has already said, that top road there, it can be a bit of a rat run. And it does alter, it depends on what shift work is happening as well. So that's the big one for me. And I would still say it's about sustainability and also the precedent that it sets. So I wouldn't be supporting the proposal.
Okay, thank you, Mike. I've got Rosemary Carroll next. Rosemary, do you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah. Hi, I totally agree with Mike. It is totally unsustainable.
Sorry, Rosemary, I know it might be an inconvenience. Can you turn that fan off momentarily, because I can't seem to hear you properly. I don't know about other people.
It's not in here.
Better.
Right. For me, I agree with Mike. It's unsustainable and nothing has changed. There's nothing wrong with the application itself. It's how you get to it that is the problem. Salford Lane is very narrow. There's no footpaths there. There's no public transport. And when you get down near the Anchor E, it gets very narrow. And that is only one of two ways in and out, unless you go up the back lane. So I'm of the same view that I don't agree with this application and we should turn it.
Thanks for that, Rosemary. Mike, can I just check the grounds for refusal that you're moving on? You said that you're not going to support it. Do you have any grounds for refusal? You're on mute, Mike. You're still on mute. That's it. Go on, Mike.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I think we raised this in the area committee. The only grounds that I would put forward for refusal are it is not a sustainable site.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Let me just, I've seen somebody else with a raised hand. Councillor Nadeem Ahmed.
Yes, thank you. Listened carefully to the arguments on both sides, and Councillor Whip spoke very well on the reasons for approving this application. And I understand some of the points and arguments raised by Councillor Whip and the applicants in terms of the benefits it brings to the local area in terms of the economy, job creation. It'll give a huge boost to local businesses, especially at these difficult times. So I can understand them arguments. There are obviously concerns around the sustainability argument raised by other councillors. But for me, more so is the highways issue, which I'm concerned with. I understand in terms of the traffic the site will generate. It won't be like a normal residential development where people are leaving in the morning and it's busy, say at 9 o'clock and then at rush hour. But I am concerned about the highways concerns, and reluctantly, and it is a difficult one, I'll be honest, it is a difficult one. You could argue either side, because I can see the benefits to West Craven and Pendle as a whole. But unfortunately, I won't be able to support this application.
Okay, thank you. And next I've got Councillor Brian Newman. Brian, do you want to unmute yourself? Brian, you need to unmute yourself to talk. No, Brian seems to have gone quiet.
Okay.
All right, Brian, we can hear you now.
Can you hear me now? Right. I'd just like to know what the impact will be on the quarrying for the surrounding area.
Okay. Neil, are you able to answer that?
To be honest, Chairman, no, the quarry is below. Obviously, they wouldn't be able to quarry it more and bring the wall back because that would probably undermine the stability of the lodges. But I haven't got a complete answer about what the impact will be on quarrying. The only thing I would say, that's not something you should really take on board in determining the application. That's for someone else to deal with. It's not a material consideration here. Chairman, whilst I'm on, if I raise my hand, if I just mention one point as well, there was a refusal of permission of a different scheme. That was not based on highway impacts, and obviously we are dealing with this as a council, not as individual committees. And I understand Councillor Ahmed's concerns, but if you refuse on highway grounds, and this isn't a threat, I just think it's a fact, we'll go down for costs for being inconsistent. So my advice would be very strongly not to refuse on a ground that we've already looked at and considered to be acceptable as a council.
Okay, thanks for that, Neil. Brian, did you need to come back?
No, that.
You've just unmuted yourself. I take it that you don't want to. That's fine. Next, I've got David Whip. You indicated to come back again.
If I may, Chairman, just to cover a couple of points. First of all, in terms of the quarry, it's a disused quarry, and the stone which has been mounded up on the site, as I understand it, is what's been recovered from the bottom of the quarry from around the site. So I don't believe there is any intention to undertake any fresh quarrying, and as Neil Watson has pointed out, that would be subject to an application to somebody else if that were the case. But the second point I wanted to make is this issue about sustainability. I think most of us go on holiday, and as a family, we've gone on holiday to Cornwall, time immemorial, and we go to campsites, not caravan sites, but we find those in quite unsustainable locations, and I suspect that most of the holiday destinations that we have in Britain are unsustainable in that sense, because let's face it, most of us don't want to go on holiday in the centre of towns which are sustainable locations. And within our policies, we have a balance to strike between the visitor destination, that tourism industry, and the setting that off against the sustainability argument. And it's quite clear within those policies that that's a judgment. So I think it's entirely reasonable for people to say, well, it's not a sustainable location. I think on the other hand, in order to have a sustainable tourism destination, you're not going to have it in the middle of Cole, in the middle of Nelson, in the middle of Bonalswick. A development of this nature, has to have the sort of surroundings that appeal to people who are likely to pay decent money to come and visit it. So that's the final thing. Oh, there was one last thing. People have mentioned Salterforth Lane as being as unsuitable. Just point out that the proposed development is on High Lane, not on Salterforth Lane.
Okay, Thanks for that, David. I've had no other indication to speak, so I'm proposing to move to the vote. Rather than having two separate votes, clearly we've got one motion moved by Councillor David Whip, seconded by myself to approve the application as set out in the report. And the other motion was from Councillor Mike Goulthorpe, seconded by Rosemary Carroll, to refuse this application on the grounds of sustainability. So I will go through each councillor's name, and if you could just please unmute yourself and indicate whether you are for the application, against the application, or you wish to abstain, and then put yourself back on mute. So I'll go in alphabetical order. Councillor Nadeem Ahmed.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Zafar Ali.
Sorry, Chairman, I broke up for a second. Can I just ask for a repeat of the wording of the motion?
Yeah, the motion to approve is as set out on the report. The motion to refuse is on the grounds of sustainability. So it's either a vote for the application, against the application, or abstain.
I'll be voting for the application, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Mohammed Aslam.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Rosemary Carroll.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Colin Carter.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor David Clegg.
For.
Thank you. Sarah Coburn Price.
Against.
Thank you. Mike Goulthorpe.
Against.
Mohammed Iqbal. For. Brian Newman. Brian, you need to unmute yourself. Brian, you're on mute. I can see you, but I can't hear you. You need to unmute yourself, Brian. That's it. Are you for? You
Against.
Against. Okay. Councillor Mohammed Saqib. Saqib.
For.
Thank you. Yvonne Tennant.
For.
Thank you. And David Whip.
For.
Thank you. So if you just bear with me. So Jane, correct me if I'm wrong. I've got 6 in favour and 7 against.
That's correct.
Okay, so the application to refuse this application has been voted through. Deborah, thank you for your attendance, and if you wish your daughter a happy birthday from the council, I'm sure you want to leave us and go and enjoy your celebrations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, councillors, I'll go back to the agenda now, and the next planning application is for the land at Trough Lathe Barrowford Road in Barrowford, and I have Richard O'Brien to speak. Richard, you've got up to 5 minutes in which to address the committee, and then if you just put yourself on mute, please. So Richard.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm Richard O'Brien, the Design Director at Northstone, with the applicant for the proposal. Obviously, I'm grateful to have the opportunity to speak to you today about our application for Trough Lathe Barrowford. Members will be aware that the application site forms part of the largest single housing allocation in the Pendle Core strategy, and it is a critical part of the forward supply of housing land. The application represents the first phase of development at Trough Lathe, covering the southern half of the site only, with the ability to provide a link through to the northern part, enabling this to be developed as a future phase. Access to the site is taken off Barrowford Road only, located to the south. The application proposes 239 dwellings, including 48 affordable homes, to be delivered in 2 phases. This represents by far the largest single contribution to affordable housing from any scheme in the borough. Northstone are a new northwest-based development company who don't just want to build houses, but we want to create homes, exceptional spaces, and new communities where families will want to live, grow, and thrive. And this is reflected in the design approach to the site and the houses we build. We've had the opportunity to design our homes from the foundation up, specifically concentrating on making them sustainable and energy efficient, whilst providing the space and design that people want from a new home. We're proud of this approach, and we believe that we're offering quality and choice which other volume house builders do not. We hope that the images you've just seen will convey the standard and quality we're committed to achieving. Troth Lathe is our second scheme and the largest to date. We've worked with your officers for over the last 10 months to design a scheme which we feel is right for the location and its setting, and this includes the design and location of open space within the site, steps taken to achieve an effective and sensitive interface with the surrounding developments, and significant new tree planting across the scheme. Is guided by and builds on the outline planning permission approved in 2016. We've adhered to the parameters of that permission with which our scheme is fully compliant. Our houses have many efficiencies built into their design, starting from the first principle of their shape and their size to achieve the most efficient use of the land available in line with the requirements of NPPF and to offer a wide choice to the buying public. We've designed our homes to use as little energy as possible and to surpass the minimum requirements of building regulations. Homes will achieve on average a 16 to 18% improvement above the minimum standard. Increased levels of insulation and the integration of a highly efficient window system are used to achieve this. But in addition, a wastewater heat recovery system, a renewable form of energy production, has been integrated into every home. These proposals produce substantial energy savings, ensuring that predicted running costs are low. This will appeal to all homeowners, but more importantly, will assist in reducing the manufacture and consumption of energy. Internally, the homes are designed open plan to allow for flexible use of space to suit individual needs, and areas are easily set aside for home working. We have partnered with a broadband supplier that provides 1 gigabyte data speeds, substantially faster than any other domestic provider. At the front door and integrated into the porch design, a secure home delivery store is provided for every house. In terms of creating place, we've applied a similar logic to the hard and soft landscape design, and to achieve this, different areas of the site will be identified by colour as a way of creating easily recognised routes and pathways to assist in visually navigating around the site. Areas of landscaped open space are provided within the scheme. These are purposely designed to generate homeowner interaction and to promote the idea of neighbourliness. The shared surface access roads, designed for very low traffic speeds, will provide opportunity for children to play safely within the street. We're immensely proud of the development that we're creating, and we believe that we're doing something different and setting a new benchmark for design quality and innovation in new house building. This gives us a competitive advantage, but more importantly, makes for better places. We look forward to bringing our homes to Pendle. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Richard. The next speaker I have on this is Robert Oliver on behalf of Barrowford Parish Council. Robert, are you with us if you want to unmute yourself?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
I can, Robert. Yeah, you've got
Right,
up to 5 minutes.
Yeah, I am a Barrowford Parish Councillor for Carr Hall, but I'm speaking in a personal capacity, even though it is on issues raised by the Parish Council. And I have questions on affordable housing and on footpaths. I haven't been able to read all the massive amounts of documents, so forgive me if the questions have already been answered in them. One I have read was the refusal to allow the recent application for non-material amendments, which could have affected the amount of affordable housing that was created in the early stage. In fact, I was a bit puzzled to hear Mr. O'Brien say that the affordable housing was going to be done in 2 phases, because I thought that was the whole point of the application for the non-material amendments, which has been refused. So perhaps he can enlighten me on that. I was pleased to hear that 48 houses, i.e. 20%, are going to be affordable housing in this phase or in the first 239. But I see that only 22 are what could be called starter homes, which is one of the NPPF's criteria for affordable housing. So my first question is, what are the criteria going to be used for defining the 27 other affordable housing units? Moving on to footpaths, I see that the countryside officer called for a Section 38 agreement, but that doesn't seem to have been adhered to. He also called for upgrading of footpath 28, the one that runs across the southern end of the site. And a personal item from me here, the state of footpath 33 running across the top half of what's scheduled to be built between Laund Farm and Maylands Avenue, I think it is, at the northeastern edge, is in the most terrible state because roads have been created across it. I'm not sure if these roads have any sort of planning permission on them, which have almost obliterated the footpath. And I would ask whether the developers, or rather when the developers, are going to put this right. So those are my 4 questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. I've got an indication from Councillor Ken Turner to speak, and then Richard, if you can just pick up on those questions from Robert, and in case Ken's got any as well. Ken, do you want to just unmute yourself, and if you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, following on from Councillor Oliver, I also have immense concerns on the development. I was delighted to see the refusal of the non-material variations that were applied for. And I would like some assurance that under the applications for the non-material would have seen the affordable housing being almost decimated and being given the opportunity of being integrated as and when the developers so felt. Also, the flood tanks. Again, there is opportunity for variation on the flood tanks with the non-material that were there, and now they have been refused. But what I am concerned about is they are not to be slid in at a later stage with another non-material application for variation. And also, in the application that was there was permission to move into stage 2 before completion of stage 1. Now, all this, along with the heavy vehicles traffic that will be coming along Riverside Way, the lack of facility on the site for community shopping in that location, it means that people will have to travel very strongly to Barrowford or to Nelson in order to get normal run-of-the-mill shopping. I did speak with Northstone, and they were intimating that they would be happy to apply for a community shopping area to be located in that area, along with scheduled car parking for it, so as to give the residents the opportunity of having a local small corner shop area for them to go to. Now, we all realise that under the strategic housing, that they have the right to continue and to start to build this in the development that they have put. But please, can we have this committee's assurance, and can they apply conditions that the flood tanks, as per design, and the discharge of water from the flood tanks as per pre-arranged will not be adjusted by any method during the construction of these or any subsequent houses, that the affordable housing will be completed in its first stage for the first stage, and not deferred to a later period where there may be difficulty then on seeing them built or not built. And also, of course, this first stage must be completed prior to any further additional stage to the head of the top of the development coming onto Wheatley Lane Road. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Ken. Richard, I'm going to give you the opportunity to respond to those questions, if you wouldn't mind, please. And then I've got Neil Watson, who wants to come in.
Yes, okay, thank you. Right, the affordable housing, which I referred to, the 48 units, I said it's in 2 phases because it's within 2 separate build areas of the site. So as we move into the site, actually at the very front of the site, there is a first phase of affordable housing. As we then move across into the second phase of development, that's of the approval. And you can see on the drawing that's being shared on the screen, the second phase is first phase at the front of the site, second phase over in the bottom right-hand corner. So those are on 2 different construction pathways, which is why I referred to it as 2 phases. So if I've caused confusion with that, then obviously I'd just clarify that. With reference to the footpaths and section 38, we've actually agreed to surface the footways and include them in a section 38 to be entered into for the development. Obviously, at the moment, not all of that work has been concluded, but it will be done in terms of that. Could you just remind me then of the 3rd and 4th items that you want a clarification on?
There's the issue raised by Councillor Ken Turner about the flood tanks not being just snuck in at some future point. But
I think Neil, if you could answer in terms of the non-material amendment, then that would show that the conversation that has been had between ourselves and the local authority, as I say, Neil will be able to answer that more clearly than I could.
Okay.
In terms of the local shop facility, we have land holdings to the south of the housing site, and we could talk to our partners in terms of the adjacent land to see if there's a facility that would be sustainable in terms of a shop location. At the time, if Councillor Turner can remember, when we had the conversation, what we were worried about was taking shopping out of the high street, and as we know, every high street at the moment is suffering. But if we take shopping out of the high street and take it to that location, whilst people are going to a local store, if they go into a high street, they go to other stores as well. So there's a positive benefit actually to, whilst we still want to consider it, there's a positive benefit to keeping shopping in that sort of central location. It does mean that people will be using and hopefully using footways and things that take you into the town centre from our site. And by doing that, we're going to be able to obviously, hopefully, limit traffic movement.
Okay, thanks for that, Richard. Neil, can I bring you in? Robert, I've got you down. I just want to bring Neil in first, and then I'll come back to you if you just bear with me. Neil?
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of points. Chairman, we need to make sure that when as a local authority we're making decisions based on the application. So I fully understand the points about community shops, etc. But really, it's nothing to do with this planning application. So you need to be clear on what you're making decisions on. Chairman, just one point about affordable houses. The definition of what's affordable changes. And it changes every time we get a different version of the National Planning Policy Framework. Starter homes weren't in play in 2015. It's a later edition of government. So I wouldn't expect these to be starter homes, although we would have no objection if they were. But there is a definition of affordable housing, provided they are affordable housing in accordance with the NPPF definition. We're okay with that. Chairman, in terms of the changes of conditions, don't read anything into why we initially rejected those. We simply rejected those on a technical matter, not on a form of substance. Chairman, what we want here is for every phase of development to get the infrastructure it needs, whether that's for roads, whether that's for drainage, etc. And provided that happens for each phase of development, then I think there is scope to slightly vary the conditions. And Chairman, we have a phasing condition on the outline consent, which the developers will have to come on and satisfy as a different part of this. I don't expect a development to be fully completed in one phase before the next phase goes on. You might get 80-90% completion and then move on to the next phase, and that, I think, is, from the discussions we've had with the applicants, that is what the non-material amendments were about. But again, that is a separate issue to what you're looking at here. I think, Chairman, for this, in terms of the flood tanks, which Councillor Turner refers to, that complies with the requirements of the outline consent, which looked at the overall drainage strategy. It's satisfactory for this stage, and we've had the Lead Local Flood Authority and Environment Agency look at that, and we've had no objections to what is being proposed. So, just overall, Chairman, we need, although I do appreciate it's important for communities to look at things like, and we've had doctors' surgeries mentioned, we've had shopping areas. We are bound by the approval we made in outline as an authority. That doesn't mention these. So, Chairman, I would advise you not to go through those because they are not relevant to the determination of this application.
Okay, thanks for that, Neil. Robert, you asked some questions, and I'm going to give you another crack to come back in to speak if you wish to.
Thank you. Well, Mr. O'Brien, I think, wanted to be reminded what my last two questions were. One was the footpath officer's recommendation for upgrading of footpath 28 at the south of the site, which doesn't seem to have been mentioned in the planning officer's report. And nor indeed was the Section 38 agreement, and I'm pleased to hear that something of that sort is going to happen. My last point, and I'm tempted to say it should be a condition of the approval, if councillors are reminded to approve, the reinstatement of footpath 33, which has been, as I say, pretty well obliterated in places at the top of the site.
Okay, thanks, Robert. Neil, do you want to comment on what Robert has raised there in terms of the footpath that's been obliterated, using Robert's words? You're on mute, Neil.
Muted, sorry. Chairman, I'll take that to the County Council through Mr. Partridge, because if it's been obliterated, then there are powers that the county have as Highways Authority to deal with that. Chairman, any other requests for upgrades of footpaths, etc., not within the site, should be part of a Section 106 agreement that should have been agreed at the outline stage. So, Chairman, that to me is outside of the scope of what we can require for this application.
Okay, thanks, Neil. Ken, you wanted to... I'm sorry, Robert, I can't bring you back in for a third time. But Ken, you indicated to come in. Ken Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry about that. I forgot to demute it. Very quickly, I appreciate that the concepts of a medical centre and a small commercial unit were separate and were not part of this application, and we did discuss those. I do appreciate those, but I'm thinking of the input of the residents and the certainly no way would I see any reduction in the high street in Barrowford. However, when we talk of the flood tanks, and I can appreciate Mr. Watson's opinion on that we're only doing the first section, but the location of the flood tanks are such that once they are in situ and they will be built over with the constructions, you will not be able to adjust them later. So therefore, the flood tanks is important that they are sufficient and strong enough and large enough to take the water and the discharge of the water for the whole site when the site is completed. I understand Mr. Watson's suggestion that when the site is 80-90% completed on the ground floor, they then can move to the second phase. I can agree with that, but the wording of the non-material application for variation was a little bit woolly and actually would have given opportunity for them to have moved to phase 2, before completion, or even, and I can appreciate why the 2 affordable housing sites are in 2 separate locations, because they're 2 different sides of the site. I accept that, but it didn't, they were so woolly that they wouldn't have had to have done any technically until they were ready to do it at the end of the development. I would like to see that if this application goes through, and I'm going to be honest, I quite like the design that they've engineered. I quite appreciate the way that they have engineered into it to encourage people to use electronic charging points for motor vehicles so as to cut down environmentally. But I do wish and I do hope that we will always realise that we need adequate flood protection for the rest of the sites, that we need to look after the residents that are on there and to give them the facilities that they will need, and also to appreciate the difficulties that the mass amount of vehicles that will be coming and going from this site, because this site will be occupied predominantly by people who are using it as a jumping ground. They won't be working in this area because there aren't going to be enough jobs left around the way this is all going. They're all going to be commuter traffic. A lot of it is going to be commuter traffic, and we must make adequate provision for them. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thanks for that, Ken, and thanks to Robert and also to Richard in terms of your contributions. I mean, I'm happy to start the debate on this. Just picking up on the last few points that you've made there, Ken. I mean, you're right that possibly, you know, if we were pre-March this year, then, you know, one could argue that these were going to be commuter houses for people to jump on the M65 and go to Manchester or go across to Leeds or other places. But the world has changed, as we all know it, and, you know, that's a challenge for us as a council now to try and get those high quality jobs on our doorstep for people that live in these high quality homes, simply to walk down to work or do things as we are this afternoon. So the world is changing, and I'm optimistic in terms of the prospects for our area. In terms of your points about flooding, I mean, I was at the meeting back in 2017 when we went for outline, and one of the big concerns from local residents was around the issue of flooding. But I think condition 7 on page 18 of the report that's been done by the officer makes it quite clear that no development at all can take place until the issue around the watercourses and the flooding has been submitted and agreed by our officers. And I think Neil gets the message loud and clear on behalf of certainly the people that you represent, Ken and Robert, that, you know, flooding is a major concern and was a concern back in 2017, no doubt still is and will continue to be, because, you know, Barrowford has suffered from flooding in recent years. But I'm confident that that condition addresses the concerns that you have in terms of the flooding issue, because the officers will make sure that, you know, they find it very difficult for the applicants to wriggle out of any issues that potentially affect any flooding in that area. But just talking in terms of the scheme in general, I mean, I know this was a contentious site back in 2017, and, you know, some colleagues argued that it shouldn't be there, but we are where we are. And, you know, I'm glad that we're now moving on to an actual stage of actual development and, you know, getting some houses on the ground, and commend the applicants for the scheme that they brought forward. It's a high quality scheme, which I think will complement what's in Barrowford in Western parishes, and certainly complement what we've got in Pendle to bring about a much needed housing requirement for a different type of occupier, who hopefully will then go on to spend the money within Barrowford High Street, because, you know, if nothing else, what this area needs now is local people to spend the money in the local shops. So the challenge is there for the High Street in Barrowford and for other parts of the borough that these people will visit once the houses are occupied, to rise up to the challenge. I mean, I've had a read of the report, fully aware of the site in its entirety, because, you know, I've been after this for the last 2 or 3 years, and I'm going to move from the chair that we approve the application as is set out with the conditions. And I think it's a testament to the work done by our officers in partnership with both the parish council, ward councillors and the applicants to bring a scheme that's of high quality, as I've just said. You know, not just a run-of-the-mill scheme where the applicants would potentially look to get approval and then just try and flog it onto the next highest bidder. You know, I've read about the applicants, and I'm confident that they'll do something that we'll all be proud of in years to come. So I'm going to move from the chair that we approve the application. I've got an indication from Councillor David Whip to speak. David, are you seconding me, or are you?
Yes, I will second a resolution to approve this. I've listened carefully to all the speakers, and I'm fully aware that this is a reserved matters, in other words, a detailed application where the principle and a lot of the issues that people are rightly concerned about were matters that needed to be dealt with at the outline application stage. So the issues that we can properly look at today: appearance, landscaping, layout and scale. And listening carefully to both Robert Oliver and Ken Turner, there wasn't a lot in terms of their contributions which actually addressed those 4 issues. So I think, you know, in some senses, we're at a position, there is the principle of development approved there. Some of the issues that have been raised today would be more appropriately raised at that point. But, you know, as I think you've just said, we are where we are. This issue of having a shop on the development, I very much subscribe to bolstering our high streets and you know, keeping the retail going where we already have it. So I think all of those issues are ones that are worthy of discussion, but they're not sufficient, or it's not the appropriate time now for us to make decisions based on the issues that should or perhaps have been dealt with previously. So I would second the motion to approve.
Thanks for that, David. Is there any other councillor that wants to speak? I can't see any hands raised on the thing. Give you a few seconds before I move on. No. Okay, so I've got one proposal on the table, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Whip, to approve the application as set out. So again, I'll read out your name, and if you can indicate whether you're for, against, or you wish to abstain, and then put yourself back on mute, please. Councillor Nadeem Ahmed.
Against.
Councillor Zafar Ali.
For.
Councillor Mohammed Aslam.
Against.
Councillor Rosemary Carroll.
Against.
Councillor Colin Carter.
Against.
Sorry, Councillor David Clegg.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Sarah Coburn Price.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mike Goldthorpe.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Mohammed Iqbal. For. Councillor Brian Newman. Brian Newman. Brian, you're on mute. Brian, you're still on mute.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mohammed Saqib.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Yvonne Tennant. Yvonne Tennant. Yvonne, can you hear me? Oh, that sounded weird, Yvonne. Yvonne,
Sorry, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Yeah, reluctantly for.
Okay, thank you. Councillor David Whip.
For.
Thank you. So if you just bear with me, 3, 4. So I have 8 in favour of the application and 5 against. So the application is approved as set out. Can I thank Richard and John for joining the meeting? You're more than welcome to stop for the rest of the meeting. but I'm sure you've got better things to do.
Thank you very much, committee.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, then the next application is for the erection of 114 dwellings up at the former Jimmy Nelson's. And I have Bill Fulster, who's the agent. Bill, are you with us?
I am. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, the floor is yours for up to 5 minutes, Bill.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Bill Fulster, and I'm the agent for the application. I'm also Head of Land and Planning at MCI Developments, who are one of the joint applicants. MCI Development specialises in delivering 100% affordable housing schemes and is 100% owned by Keepmoat Homes, which is one of the largest house building companies in England. If permission is granted, then the intention is that MCI would build the scheme for our registered provider partner, who will manage the properties once they are completed. Your officer's report is very comprehensive and clearly sets out the reason justification as to why the application is recommended for approval. I hope you will accept your officer's recommendation, and I'd just like to point out a few of the main benefits the scheme will provide if you vote to accept your officer's recommendation. Firstly, the scheme will provide 114 new affordable homes where they are needed and which could not be provided in any other way. The scheme will secure over £4.5 million of Homes England grant funding, which could otherwise be directed outside the borough to other sites elsewhere in the country. The tenure and mix of the dwellings has been determined in conjunction with your housing strategy team and our partner registered provider, so you can be assured these units are what is needed in the area. As well as the scheme providing some much needed 4-bedroom larger units, there are also a number of bungalows on the scheme, which would be ideal for elderly and or younger residents with impaired mobility. The design of the scheme and the elevational treatment of the dwellings has been the subject of detailed discussion with your officers and takes into account the local vernacular. Notwithstanding the scheme is only marginally viable, as confirmed by the Independent Financial Viability Assessment, which has been reviewed and accepted by your officers. Following discussions with your officers and landowners, we've managed to secure a financial contribution of £100,000 towards planning gain. As set out in your officer's report, this sum of money will be used to provide extra local school places, help to secure local bus services, and provide improvements to off-site play facilities. I do hope you will accept your officer recommendation and use your vote to help deliver this 100% affordable regeneration development scheme. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill, for that. Before I bring any councillors in, Neil, is there anything that you need to add?
No, Chairman, not at this point. Thank you.
I like these meetings, Neil. Your contribution seems to be shorter and shorter. Okay, has anybody any questions of either Bill or Neil? I have, just bear with us. I've got Yvonne Tennant and then Sarah Coburn-Price. Yvonne, if you want to unmute yourself.
Am I on?
I can hear you, Yvonne.
Muted.
You are.
You can hear me, right? Okay. There's a couple of questions, really. There's, I think it's page 10. In terms of residential amenity, it says past the.
Yvonne, if you can hear me, I think your internet connection's either poor because you.
Yvonne,
can you hear me? Yvonne?
Yeah.
Your voice was broken up. All I heard was that page 10, residential amenity, and then after that, your voice disappeared.
Oh, how strange. Can you hear me now?
Actually, I think we've got a delayed reaction because your lips seem to be moving and then your voice comes out.
Same with you. Right, can you hear me now?
I can, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Page 10 says that other properties along Priory Chase and Clough Road would see an increase in traffic past the properties, but would not unduly be affected otherwise. I think there's going to be quite a significant increase in traffic. So I don't quite understand why this is in the report, because
okay,
there will be an increase.
Yeah, Yvonne, I've got the gist of that question, which I'll put to Neil. I think it might help your internet connection if you turn your video off.
Right.
Can you hear me, Yvonne? You seem to have frozen on screen now.
That any better? It still seems to be slow.
No, that's better, a lot better now. Did you have any question? Did you have any other question for Neil?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. Offside works. There's going to be an awful lot of additional pressure on Barker House Road with the vehicular movements. Can't we put in a condition asking the developer to contribute to previous upgrades which are agreed for the Clough Head development, so they could work together? I mean, all I can see in this report is a contribution to 2 humps, which isn't really enough, as it were. And there's already the building at the development of the back of Marsden Grange is already causing traffic problems on Barker House Road. And that's a relatively small one. Can we possibly ask the developers to do more in terms of this? And I got the impression from the report that the developers are saying they can't contribute anything to education and whatever, but the agents just said that they will. So I'd like that clarifying a bit, please.
Okay, thanks, Yvonne. Neil, do you want to pick up on Yvonne's questions and I'll bring Sarah in?
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, what at the bottom of page 10, when we're talking about traffic, it's an issue you have to look at about residential amenity. So it's just saying there will be an increase in traffic because obviously a development will generate traffic, but that level of impact would not be such as to refuse the application. And Chairman, it's really saying what we've said when this went to appeal and the traffic was assessed there. So I won't read anything in particular into that. It's just dealing with a potential loss of amenity. Chairman, for off-site works, we're always in the hands of what evidence we have. If there is an impact and accepted as an impact, and that is at a level that, for example, the highway network couldn't cope with, or there was a particular danger there, then we would ask for an increase in the infrastructure to be provided. If you recall, Chairman, when we did further Clough Head, what we said is there was no evidence to suggest that crossings are needed, but I think the council found another way of dealing with that, and that's what's coming out of the evidence here. On Priory Chase itself, there's a need to slow traffic down. There's a need to look at the roundabout and configure that, and some to prevent parking there, and that's dealt with in the application. But there will be the evidence is suggesting, and the county agree that there will be no unacceptable impacts on Barker House Road itself. So, I'm in your hands, Chairman. If there's evidence that will happen, then fine. But at the moment, the impact assessment, the traffic impact assessment, is saying that would Barker House Road, the capacity of it wouldn't be exceeded. Chairman, in terms of contributions, we do refer to the contributions on page 17 at point 10. So you're always in this cleft stick. We do need contributions for infrastructure. That's got to be balanced against whether the site's viable. what we understand is the owner of the land has taken a hit on that to contribute £100,000 into the scheme, and that can be used to have the legitimate concerns of education, etc., satiated. So there's £100,000 there. But when you look at the viability impact assessment, the viability of the scheme and land values are about, well, the less than half of what developers are getting in Colne at the moment. So in terms of land prices, they're very reasonable. There's a 10% profit on development. The government is saying you should be at 20% before you're asking for contributions. So, Chairman, it's a really difficult one. We have, I think, secured some contributions. That's been based on not the viability assessment, but the landowner taking a hit on that. But profit levels are below what would make a site normally viable. But obviously, this scheme will be for affordable units. That's what makes it a little bit more secure, and your development can come forward with less profit than you would be if you were lending against the normal lending institutions. I don't know whether that answers the question properly, Chairman. That's the best we can get to with this. I think £100,000 is a good way of dealing with this, bearing in mind viability is a lot lower than we would, and the government are telling us we should ask for. 10% should be 20%, and below 20% you shouldn't be asking for contributions, because that makes a scheme unviable. So, Chairman, I think all round the contribution of £100,000 will get a lot of what we want out of this scheme in terms of the infrastructure, but I don't think there's any more that we could extract from that without basically undermining the whole scheme.
Okay, thanks for that, Neil. Sarah, you've indicated to speak.
Thank you. I welcome this scheme on the whole, but as a mummy, I just really appreciate parks and amenity space. And this comes up several times in the report. You know, there are these pocket parks, but wouldn't it be wonderful? We just had the discussion and explanation from Neil about the £100,000. We don't need to give it. Wouldn't it be wonderful? And I'm speaking to my other councillors really to see whether they're with me. If that could be redeployed to make some appreciable amenity space, because I read the report and I know there's a hilly site, 700 metres slogging up and down hill with little children complaining they're tired. Will you pick me up? It is exhausting, and I just would like to explore that leeway.
Okay, thanks for that, Sarah. Neil, can I just ask the question in terms of the 100,000 contribution? I know the county want it for their bus service, and you know that's the county council, full stop. But if as a committee we said, well, no, we'll give. I mean, I understand that. Okay, there's £100,000. The total contribution, but is there an option for us to use that 100,000 creatively, not necessarily for the bus service, full stop?
Chairman, provided that it's a legitimate off-site provision and it's necessary to make the development acceptable, which these elements are, I don't think it's using it creatively. I would say it's using it legitimately. So yes, if you didn't agree with our priorities we've written down, then yes, that money could be used for alternative legitimate provision.
Okay, I'm just going to come back to speak, but Bill, you've just to put your hand up, so maybe you can help with this discussion. Bill?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, we'd be happy to allow the £100,000 to be used for whatever the members decide is appropriate, as long as it fulfills the criteria as explained by our planning officer. So we are not precious as to how it's used, but it has to be justifiable and reasonably necessary in line with the policy requirements. Thank you.
That's very helpful, Bill. But I mean, in terms of the application itself, and I'll pick up around the 100,000 in a second. There have been concerns in that area on a previous application, which we're not debating today, about private developers coming in and basically, taking away the profits. But I think what's commendable of MCI developments, along with Accent, is that all these homes will be affordable homes. And I think in the current climate, and no matter where you live, and obviously my primary concern is Pendle, no matter where you live, affordable homes in this day and age are very hard to come by. And as Neil said, on the previous application, what's the definition of an affordable home? But I'd be much happier if those affordable homes were allocated to those families that really need affordable homes, to those young families who really need to get onto the housing market ladder. And I think that's something that would be positive. So in terms of the application itself, I'm more than happy as chairman of this committee to move that we approve the application. In terms of the 100,000, I'm aware, Neil, and maybe this is not possibly a discussion for today, but I know there's some Section 106 money that's still left in a pot from another scheme very close by that's been there historically for a number of years. And I'm just wondering whether you use part of this £100,000 and some of that previous 106 money, because I think Sarah makes a valid point that if I'm a young mum who's, pushing up them prams or carrying them kids up Barker House Road, by the time I get up to the homes on this development, I'll be as thin as a rake with all the exercise. But clearly, kids need somewhere to play. There's a deficiency of play areas in that area generally, and Yvonne's a ward councillor, no doubt she would agree anyway. So if it helps, I mean, in terms of the 100,000 and the other 106 money, Neil, if we can park that to be discussed between our officers, the ward councillors, and the developer to make sure that we use the money legitimately. But with that comment, I'm more than happy to move that we approve this application as is set out, and certainly look forward to Accent, welcoming young families into the area who otherwise wouldn't really get a chance to get into their own homes. I'm looking for a seconder. Nadeem, you've got your hand to speak. Are you going to second me, or do I need to find somebody?
I won't second you just yet, Mr. Chairman.
Right. Can I just ask for a seconder first, then, and then I'll bring you in next? Just bear with me. Somebody's raised their hand. Zafar, I've got you. Are you seconding me?
I am, Chairman. I just have a couple of comments, if Nadeem doesn't mind, whilst I am seconding you, and it's in relation to, as you've put it, the use of the Section 106 money to try and put some, leisure facility, so to speak, be it by way of a multi-use games area or a play area. I think, whilst I'm fully in support of the idea, I think it's important that there's a long-term viability sort of plan in relation to any additional facility, because the last thing you want is for money to unfortunately dry up and then town councils having to pick up the facilities. And whilst we have a great working relationship with, for example, in this case, Nelson Town Council and Pendle Borough Council, we need to understand the difficulties that town councils will have going forward in picking up these type of facilities, if that was to be the case. But that was just a side point. Whilst, like I said, I'm fully in support of this, and I will second you, Chairman.
Okay, thanks for that, Zafar. Nadeem?
Yes, generally all in favour of the general principle of the scheme, and really pleased with the affordable housing aspect of the scheme. But just a couple of points in terms of also the Section 106 money. I think the contribution, that's really positive and much needed in Nelson. But what still is concerning me is, I know the report mentions about highways. What worries me is the cumulative effect of the housing schemes in that particular area, which we've approved since 2013, I think the report refers to. There's been a number of quite major applications in that area in terms of the housing. And somebody mentioned the issue about Barker House Road and the traffic issue. I mean, I totally disagree that the traffic issues in that area are horrendous. And we're talking of another significant number of properties being added. And that problem in terms of highways is going to get worse. That's not to say I'm not in favour of the principle of the idea, the affordable housing. I think it's much needed. But I do have concerns. I'm just looking for some assistance from, through you, Chair, from Neil, please. Neil.
I mean, I'll bring Neil in a second, but I think in terms of this application, I'll talk about the previous application that we dealt with as a committee at Further Cloughhead. I mean, we were party to Pearl, so I think we were in a position we didn't have to, but we did as a council agree and put pressure on Pearl to say, look, let's cough up some money for highways improvements on Barker House Road. I think that the point that Neil has made on this particular one is that the government say, unless, for example, Bill and Accent Homes are making more than 20% profit, As a council or as a committee, I think we're very hard pushed, correct me if I'm wrong, Neil, to say to Bill this afternoon or to Accent Horns, well, I'm sorry, even though you're making a 10% profit, we still want you to contribute to the genuine traffic concerns on Barker House Road. I don't think we can do that in this particular application, Neil, and I'm just looking for your comments to possibly clarify what I've said and to help Nadeem as well.
Chairman, I'll look at it in also in a slightly different way. If the evidence suggested that Barker House Road was far too narrow, that there was a particular point on there where accidents were happening, it will be a point where we would say that's non-negotiable. You have to improve that there because there is a known deficit. And that will be supported by the transport assessments. Chairman, what I'm saying now is that the transport assessments, which is done, is modelled, that it's a standard method of modelling across the country, isn't supporting that there is a need for infrastructure on Barker House Road, apart from around the roundabout and on Priory Chase. So, Chairman, that's what I will be saying. If you're asking for contributions to things, it used to be the test. It just had to be a minor link to them. So if it's highway related, yes, you could ask for it. It's in law now. It's under the regulations. It has to be necessary to make the development acceptable. So that's why I think you could do, because we have policies on there for open space. I think that's legitimate. It is for bus routes because that's transport. We know about that. But I don't think highway infrastructure on Barker House Road, the evidence is there to require that to be part of a 106 agreement here.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman.
Do you want to come back, Nadeem?
Yeah, I think on the highways issues, I take Neil's points on board, but I think we're going to have to agree to disagree on that one.
Okay. Fine. Is there anybody else who's not spoken? I can't see any other hands up, but I'll give you a few seconds. I'm sorry, Bill, I can't bring you back in. It's only for councillors now. I do apologise. No, so I've got one proposal on the table, which is moved by myself and seconded by Zafar Ali to approve the application. And then in terms of the contribution of £100,000 to delegate that to Neil in consultation with ward councillors and the developer. Again, I'll go through your names, and if you want to vote for, against, or abstain, if you could please indicate and then put yourself on mute. Nadeem?
Abstain.
Okay. Zafar Ali?
For.
Thank you. Mohammed Aslam?
For.
Rosemary Carroll?
For.
Thank you. Colin Carter?
For.
Thank you. David Clegg?
For.
Sarah Coburn Price?
For.
Mike Goldthorpe?
For.
Mohammed Iqbal? For. Brian Newman? Brian Newman? Earth to Brian?
For.
Mohammed
For.
Q. Yvonne Tennant? Yvonne? Sorry, Yvonne?
Yeah, against.
Okay. And David Whip?
For.
Thank you. So I have 11 in favour, 1 against and 1 abstention. So that application is approved. Bill, thank you for your attendance this afternoon. Like I said to the others, you're more than welcome to stop, but I'm sure you want to go and enjoy the weather.
Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, members.
Bye. Okay, I'm going to rejig the agenda again because I noticed we've got one more speaker pending, and I think it would only be fair of me to bring that forward. That is, councillors, the application that's at G, and that's for a construction of 2 3-bedroom detached dwellings on the garage site at the back of Gisborne Road, Blackwall. Mark, if you're still with us, if you want to unmute yourself, and you've got up to 5 minutes in which to address the committee.
Thank you, Chairman. Since our last application and subsequent refusal on the grounds of overcramped layout and the design of the dwellings, we took into consideration all committee's concerns, and then planning came to us with committee's new thoughts and comments with regards to design and a new scheme. We've worked with planning, and we reduced the original from 3 detached dwellings to 2. And this obviously decramped the site and significantly expand the curtilages of plots 1 and 2, which were committee's comments. With plots 3 and 4, the cottages, this, in my opinion, brings properties more in keeping with the immediate surroundings as well, which were committee's concerns on that. And hopefully, with us listening to the planning department and understanding the concerns of committee, we've worked with them and we've come up with a suitable scheme, hopefully for your approval. Just to add that both the previous schemes have been approved by planning. And yeah, hopefully we can get an approval. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. Neil, is there anything you need to add to this one?
No, Chairman, I'll keep quiet as usual.
Okay, can I just ask a question, Neil? I mean, Barrowford referred this because it was on the grounds of overdevelopment, that it was too big and too dominant. I mean, I read, well, I didn't read, I saw the video of that particular meeting a couple of days ago, and there wasn't much detail from Barrowford councillors in terms of what they meant by it. Are you able to help me in terms of, or is there a Barrowford councillor on? There isn't. Ken Turner, if he's still with us, maybe he could assist. But Neil, I don't think you were at the meeting, were you?
Chairman, no, I wasn't there. I obviously listened to it, but it wasn't explained in detail. But Chairman, sorry to hide it. When you go and look at the layout, it's simply not cramped. There's no way we will be able to substantiate any form of appeal based on a cramped layout with that. It just simply isn't.
Okay, that's fine. Ken, you've indicated to speak. Ken Turner.
Get out. Yeah, sorry about that. I've got to remember to keep muting this damn thing. Yeah, at the meeting, the arguments that were being brought forward was that they felt that the detached houses were not complementary to the area that they were, and they were looking more toward cottage style properties, which would have been more in keeping with the area and the location that it's at. My concern was the access onto the main road, but that has been addressed or has been agreed by Lancashire, albeit that I do feel that the access onto the main road is very restricted, and I'm a little bit concerned on that. The committee itself was of the opinion that the detached style of houses was not compatible to that local area, and they would have preferred more cottage style construction.
Okay, thanks, Ken. I've got Councillor David Whip indicating to speak. David?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm the county councillor for the area, and although I don't particularly get involved with development management issues, I do have some passing knowledge of the concerns about this site. And I think, as Councillor Turner has just pointed out, they're more to do with the design rather than it being, I think, the reason overdevelopment, too big and dominant. So I think there are genuine concerns about the design. The highway issues, I think both the previous approval and previous use of the land means that there isn't a leg to stand on with those issues. So my question, I think, to Neil Watson is, given the concerns of the local parish council and the local area committee, would a refusal on design grounds be substantiated on appeal, or could it be substantiated on appeal?
Neil?
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I think there is an argument to be had on design in most situations, and you would say I think the cottages are more in line with what's on the street frontage. So I think the cottages would be fine with that, and it's the two other houses. Chairman, if they were on the street front, I would say that, we probably wouldn't have made a different recommendation, because what you have is more traditional old cottage style terraces, which looks very nice there. But what you have, these are quite well tucked away. So they're not, unless you're walking past the up the public footpath, you're not seeing these, and they're not in a highly conspicuous location. In terms of individual design, they're perfectly okay, because they could go on different sites and work very well. So, Chairman, there is an argument to be had, but I think it's not a strong case, bearing in mind where they are tucked back, and in their individual design, there's nothing wrong with them. It is the context. But I think you don't see that context until you're up the side road. You won't see it from the main road. So I think the chances of it winning an appeal wouldn't be significant.
However, Chairman,
David, just before you speak, Mark's indicated he wants to come back. I'm going to afford him the opportunity. Maybe that may be helpful. Mark, I'm going to bring you back in.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it's just to add to Neil's comments, just with regards to the cottages. We, like I say, we tried to do a bit of both, really. Put the cottages in there, but also if you look at the opposite side of the road, there has been a new development within the past 10 years, 10, 15 years, and that's obviously a detached dwelling. Next door to that is a detached dwelling. So within probably 50 yards of the surrounding site, there are cottages, and there are also detached properties. And obviously we've taken the one out. We've tried to make it not as cramped and more appealing. And like I said, they're not visible from the road. We have tried to work out, sorry about that. Work with planning, like I say, just to fit in with what you actually wanted.
Okay, thanks for that, Mark. David, you want to come back in?
Well, Chairman, I do think the local parish council has a point in terms of them being out of character. I hear what Mr. Watson says. I mean, I've always gone off the maxim, if in doubt, throw it out. I don't think the refusal on, the character of the area of design would lead to costs being awarded. So, that's the way that I'm leaning, but I listen to what other people have to say.
Okay. Next, I've got Brian Newman. Is it Earth to Brian again? Brian, you're on mute.
Can you hear me?
I can now, and I can see you as well, mate.
All right. Okay. Yeah. My concern on this one is the actual access. There is cars always parked on the main road down there. Will there be some signage on the road to take into consideration that there will be no parking at the bottom where the access will be? Because the cars park anywhere in Blackwall.
Neil, can you answer that question?
Chairman, no signage is proposed in the scheme.
There's no signage proposed at the moment, Brian.
Right. I should think there will have to be when the development starts. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. In terms of my contribution to this, I mean, I note that obviously what the parish council have said and what Barrowford Area Committee said, clearly the other option for the applicants is to go back to the fallback position, which was an 8-unit garage site and a horticultural nursery. And I mean, a derelict stroke semi-derelict piece of land at the moment in clearly a much sought after area of the borough. And I think the scheme, as Mark Sugden has said, has been drawn up by working with our officers and based on the previous refusal by the council. I mean, the point that Brian, I think, raises was something that I was going to pick up on, and potentially we could add that on as a condition if committee were minded to approve around improving the signage by working with the county council. But I've not been to the site, and I'm happy to accept what Mr. Sugden is saying in terms of in very close proximity to this potential development. There are other similar type of houses, detached buildings that may previously have stood out but are obviously there. So I'm going to move that we approve this application with the conditions as set out by our officers, and obviously add the footnote about the signage which Brian has picked up. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Brian. Is there any other speaker before I move to the vote? Nadeem Ahmed.
Yes, listen to the debate on both sides, heard the arguments carefully, and I understand and take on board the argument about the proposals being out of character with the area, but on the other hand, there have been other developments nearby, and on balance, I don't believe the argument is strong enough if it went to appeal in terms of the building being the construction site being out of character and the proposal. So I'm gonna be in favour of this application.
Okay, thanks, Nadeem. No other speakers. Okay, I intend to move to the vote on this. So again, as previous, if you indicate when I call your name out whether you're for, against, or you wish to abstain. Nadeem Ahmed.
For.
Thank you. Zafar Ali.
For.
Mohammed Aslam.
For.
Rosemary Carroll.
For.
Colin Carter.
For.
David Clegg.
For.
Sarah Coburn Price.
For.
Mike Goldthorpe.
For.
Mohammed Iqbal. For. Brian Newman.
For.
Mohammed Sakib.
For.
Q. Yvonne Tennant.
For.
And David Whip.
Well, I'll go against. Not that it's going to do any good.
Okay. So the voting is 12 in favour of approval as set out and 1 against. So the application is approved, Mr. Sugden. You're more than welcome to stop for the rest of the meeting, where I assume that you will also be leaving us shortly.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Right, I don't think I've no more speakers. So the next application I've got is the erection of 3-storey building at the former Spiritualist Church on Vernon Street in Nelson. Neil, is there anything that you need to add on this one?
No, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. I've got a hand up. Let me just work out who that is. Zafar Ali.
Thank you, Chairman. Chair, there are a number of issues and concerns with this application. I accept, before I'm reminded by Neil, the application is obviously for access at this present moment in time, but of course it's still our job as part of this committee to look at the design, the amenity, the various different amenity aspects of the application, and there are some serious concerns over many of those areas. Some of those areas have been covered in the actual report, from the planning department. I will be asking for a seconder in a couple of minutes, although, but my proposal will be to refuse this application. The application has been met with objections, not only from residents, but of course it came to Nelson Area Committee, who also voted the application down. LCC themselves have concerns over highways safety. It goes against the CS policy and EMV4 regarding problems that the application obviously and the development will cause to the highway. Not to mention the visual amenity aspect of this application. There are no similar developments in the area. It is completely uncharacteristic-like for the area, and to suggest that because the scale of the development is similar to the previous building that was there, that makes this application acceptable, in my mind, is totally unacceptable. And that's, I suppose, one of the core reasons of the objections being met from residents in the area as well. The previous site, in fact, was derelict whilst it was being used for storage. It certainly wasn't a 3-story building. It was a single-story ex-church, spiritualist church. And this proposed development will inevitably cause a visual amenity problems, as well as residential amenity issues with loss of light, privacy for the houses backing on to the development from Hartley Street. This is, as I mentioned, a 3-story building, and to suggest that it won't affect light for these houses is, in my view, with the greatest of respect to the author of the report, in my view, it's impossible to avoid that being a problem given the height of the proposed development. Not only the scale, I suppose we're going to get into pedantics, but the height of the proposed development, unfortunately, it's inevitable that there will be a loss of light and a privacy issue. I get the privacy issue might be resolved with strategic placement of windows, etc., but the residential and visual amenity argument, in my view, is very strong. If you look at the rebuttals and objections coming forward from members and the residents of the area, it's very common. I'll move quickly on to the issue of a parking, Chairman. This application in no way, in my mind, adequately addresses the issue of a lack of parking at present on this particular stretch of the highway, and furthermore so, what provisions will be in place once this development is given the go-ahead, if it gets given the go-ahead. The parking standards requirement is for 18 parking spaces at this site. There's already a lack of parking, and this proposal, as I mentioned, does not address the current nor the future issue over the contribution towards parking facilities on this highway. Access to the site, turning obviously back to the source and intention behind this application, access to the site will certainly have a detrimental impact on the highway. We've already, in fact, experienced the detrimental impact on the highway when the demolition of the burnt down building was taking place. At the time, it was chaos, to put it politely, and to suggest that the applicant and the applicant's agent is proposing underground parking and some cycle spaces and all the rest of it, in my view, it's simply and will not be good enough. Final point, Chairman, is in relation to the 5-year supply of housing. This site is not the answer. There are major developments which we've heard already in today's meeting and in previous meetings which have been approved, and no doubt there'll be further sites coming to various area committees in future as well. But as I say, this site isn't the answer. An 18 flat or a 16 flat setup for an area where there's rows of terrace houses are parallel on both sides, to the back and the rear. And obviously you got the community centre on the right hand side, is fully uncharacteristic. So there's a number of issues, Chairman, that I'd like members to support me on, and obviously I'd invite a seconder to the proposal to refuse as well. Thank you, Chairman.
Before I do, Zafar, do you just want to just tell me what the grounds for refusal are that you're moving?
Yeah, absolutely, Chairman. As I state, it's on the grounds of visual amenity as well as residential amenity, and not to forget the highways-related issues too. I hope that's sufficient, Chairman.
Okay. Do I have a second? And then I've got Neil indicating to speak. Is there a seconder for refusal?
I'll second it.
All right. Thank you, Yvonne. Neil, I'll bring you in, and then I've got Nadeem.
Chairman, I hear the debate. Clearly, committee will make their own minds up on design and highways. I was just going to caution not to refuse on loss of light and privacy. Putting it blankly, we wouldn't have a leg to stand on. The light calculation we will do would show that there will be more than ample light to residential properties. So it will be, in a planning sense, a foolhardy thing to do to refuse on loss of light. And as has been said, privacy, we haven't got the design. If there were windows at the rear, you would not approve that design when it came along. So Chairman, other grounds fine. I think there are arguments about scale and highways we could have, but not on privacy and light. I think we will be walking head on into a full award of costs.
Okay, thanks for that, Neil. Nadeem?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I will be moving approval on this application, Chair. This is a derelict site which has been left for many, many years, and I believe the benefits the application, if approved, will bring to the area outweigh the potential problems. And I've listened carefully to Councillor Ali's arguments as to the potential problems, and I do take them on board. But I think on balance, I would move that we approve this application. In terms of the highways issue specifically, it is a town centre, predominantly it's walking distance from the town centre. It is a bus route, and taking that on board, I do not believe the highways issues will be significant. So I will be moving approval, and I hope I've got a seconder, Chair.
Okay. Sarah, are you indicating to second that?
No.
All right.
Sorry. May I
just,
speak?
I'll
second Nadeem.
All right, Aslam seconding. Okay, Sarah, you're next.
I think that it's probably a really good use for this site. So, unlike some of the other councillors, I would welcome the development on this site. But I do agree about the fact that there were already problems in the area, and this is providing only half the number of car parking spaces. So perhaps a way forward is not to not develop the site, but to look at an option whereby there would be greater parking provision. Most people today still have cars.
Thank you, Sarah. Next, I've got Zafar. You want to come back in?
Chair, if it's okay with yourself, I'm more than happy for Yvonne to come back in. She's got her hand up. I just wanted to make a couple of comments, but I'm happy for Yvonne to come in before me if she wants.
Well, it's right. I've got other people before Yvonne.
Okay,
So
Chairman, my only comments. Well, number one, I'm grateful to obviously Neil making the comments about there possibly being further issues in relation to the scale, and of course that affects the design of the overall development itself. But my point again will go back to the highways issue. This application is fully silent on the fact that the parking standards requirement is simply not being met, and to simply turn a blind eye to the current issues that this particular locality has would in my mind be extremely negligible from in certain regards too. So I just want to remind members, and again I ask for support on that basis. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Next I've got Saqib. Are you there, Saqib?
No, that's okay. I've lowered my hand.
All right, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Next, I've got Yvonne.
Okay. My issue is with Councillor Ahmed said it's a derelict site and it's been left in a bad state of repair. It has, since the fire particularly. And I'm afraid that if the owner of the land didn't bother to clean up the site, I wonder just how viable and to what quality any building would be, because it's just been left as a mess. So I will be voting against this.
Okay, thank you. Next, I've got Councillor David Whip.
Chairman, I would support refusal, but I think the grounds need to be limited to the highway issues. To include the other matters doesn't help the case and could cost on appeal. So it's not sensible to include those.
Okay. Zafar, are you happy to just take on advice from David in terms of refusing on the grounds of highways?
I am, Chairman, yes.
Okay, that's fine. Let me just check. Is there nobody else has indicated to speak? I think most people have spoken. Okay, so we've got two proposals. Again, I'll take a straight vote on this rather than having two votes for the sake of it. So the proposal to refuse the application was made by Zafar and Yvonne on the grounds of highways only. And then Nadeem has moved approval as set out, seconded by Aslam. So again, if you're in favour of the application, it's for. If you're against it, against. And if you want to abstain, it's abstain. So I'll call your name out again. Nadeem Ahmed.
For.
Thank you. Zafar Ali.
Against.
Okay. Mohammed Aslam.
For.
Rosemary Carroll.
Abstain.
Okay. Colin Carter.
Abstain.
Okay. David Clegg.
Against.
Sarah Corbin Price.
Against.
Mike Goldthorpe.
For.
Mohammed Iqbal. Against. Brian Newman.
Against.
Thank you. Mohammed Sakib. Sakib.
Sorry. Against.
Yvonne Tennant.
Against.
David Whip.
Against.
Okay, just bear with me. So I make that 3 in favour, 8 against and 2 abstentions. So the application is refused on the grounds of highways. Thank you. The next one is the erection of dormer windows at 179 Chapel House Road, Nelson. Neil, anything that you wish to add?
No, Chairman, just this is about consistency as opposed to substance. It's already been refused. The application really doesn't change in substance where we are. We approve and refuse as a council, and my concern is to make consistent decisions.
Okay, thank you for that, Neil. Let's have a look who's got the hand up. Just bear with me a second, guys. Oops. I've got Councillor David Whip first. David.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a question of whether we sustain the policies which the council as a whole has agreed should be the ones that the framework for making decisions. And the risk here is that if you approve this one, that we end up blowing a hole through the policies, which people can then drive a coach and horses in other parts of the borough. And I think Neil used the word consistent. I think we do need to maintain consistency. The risk here is that something will come along in any one of our patches which we want to resist, but because we've weakened the policies, that we can't do so. So I would move refusal on the ground set out.
Okay, I have got some other people speak, but is there a seconder for the refusal?
I'll second it.
Oh, go on, Sarah. I've got you down to speak. You might as well speak as well at the same time.
Yeah, I think this is a really bad idea on a terraced house, and just agree with everything that Councillor Whip has to say. We have to remain consistent and protect planning consistency in Pendle. This application, it's noted in the officer's report, is even worse than the original.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. Sakib, you're next.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, in Nelson, I can't recall actually refusing a dormer application in the last 3 years. As David have mentioned and Sarah have mentioned, we need to be consistent, and that's what we're doing here. It was just a misunderstanding when this application was refused. Nothing else. Normally, all applications for dormers are down for refusal. They are brought to the Nelson Area Committee where they are approved unanimously. So it's not a matter of a particular party supporting a particular, idea or so. Every single councillor on Nelson Area Committee, they like to, approve dormers. This is not the first one. And no doubt at any one time, I think we have probably 6 to 7 applications for dormers. Residents are struggling to find extra space, and they can't afford to buy next door or a bigger house. So only way they can enlarge their house is by going go. And I think since we don't have a policy on dormers, that's the issue we have. And as councillors, we need to accommodate the residents how they can enlarge their house. First application, no doubt, Sarah, it was better than this one, but because it was refused, that application could not be considered again. This is a different application. So hence, it was approved at Nelson Area Committee unanimously, and I will be supporting to approve this application.
Yvonne, I think Yvonne, you're not on mute. We can hear your ows and your ahs. So do you want to put yourself on mute? Yvonne? Oh, it's all right. We'll listen to what our conversations are. So, Saki was...
I just knocked the button. I've got cramp in my foot. I've got my hand up.
All right. Is there a seconder to support the approval? Zafar?
Yes, Chairman, I will be seconding the support for approval. I'll be seconding Councillor Saqib. I also second the comments he's made in relation to the policy on dormers. Whilst the report obviously talks, or the comments have mentioned the requirement for consistency, Councillor Saqib is right to state that by granting approval would still be consistent with the general approach, especially of Nelson Area Committee, in terms of the dealing with these types of applications. So yes, I will be seconding that.
Okay, I'll bring Neil in a second, but if I can just help colleagues, and some of you may be aware, the council does currently have a policy of resisting front dormers historically, but I think officers have allowed discretion at each area committee. So Saqib is right that over a number of years, front dormers have been approved at Nelson, but it's not been deemed as a significant departure from policy. So there is a policy, but obviously there's been flexibility afforded by officers to those respective members. Neil, you wanted to come back in?
Chairman, I was just going to say what you said at the start of what you've just advised. We do, in fact, have a policy. I think Councillor Saqib said we don't. We do. It's about good design, and we also have a supplementary planning document which advises on the design. So that's where the policy comes from. So there is, in fact, a policy in place for this.
Okay, thanks for that, Neil. Nadeem?
Yeah, I mean, dormer applications, we have this regular discussion at Nelson Area Committee and Policy and Resources Committee as to whether we should be supporting dormer applications. I think, starting as a general point, I favour dormer applications, but I do genuinely believe that when this initial application was put in, I accept it was a better design, and I would prefer a pitched roof. But we can only consider the application before us. And I understand the reasons why residents tend to apply for dormer applications. And I believe, yes, we do have a responsibility in terms of following our own policy, but there is also a responsibility, I believe, as councillors, because we are dealing with our residents, our constituents on a regular basis in terms of dealing with social issues. I accept it might not necessarily be a direct planning matter, but I think for us councillors, being human beings, there is a consideration that we have to take on board, particularly with regards to overcrowding. And numerously, I've spoken to applicants, and where they say they have this particular problem because they can't afford to buy a house. Their house, for example, they live in a 2-bedroom house and do want to extend their existing property. And I totally understand the reasons they do it. And I also understand the planning officer's arguments as well, that yes, dormers are acceptable in certain occasions in terms of the design and the size. But one thing which I think is totally unfair is when we hear the argument given for refusal is that it looks out of character, it's overbearing, because there isn't another dormer window on a particular block of houses. And I think that's unfair. For example, we've come across situations in my ward, for example, where on one street, they have dormer windows, but on the next street there's no dormer windows, and they're being told no, you can't have it. So I think on this particular block, I can't recall. There might be another dormer. I'm not sure. Neil can. I don't think there is. But in the past, I have supported dormer applications. Nevertheless, even though there's no other dormer windows, and I think it's one of them. You could argue either way. Some people might say no, it's a straightforward decision and it should be refused. But I will be supporting this application.
Okay, thank you. I don't see anybody else indicating to speak. So again, we've got a straightforward vote to refuse, moved by Councillor David Whip, seconded by Councillor Sarah Coleman-Price, and to approve by Councillor Saqib and seconded by Zafar Ali. So again, as I've done previously, I'll call your name out, and if you're either in favour of the application, for; if you're against it, against; and if you're abstaining, you're abstaining. Nadeem Ahmed?
For.
Thank you. Zafar Ali?
For.
Mohammed Aslam?
For.
Rosemary Carroll?
Against.
Colin Carter?
Against.
David Clegg?
Against.
Sarah Coleman-Price?
Against.
Mike Goldthorpe?
Against.
Mohammed Iqbal, for. Brian Newman? Brian?
Against.
Okay. Mohammed Saqib?
For.
Thank you. Yvonne Tennant?
For.
David Whip?
Against.
Okay, just bear with me. Right, so I've got in favour 6, against 7. So the application is refused. The next one, the change of use from retail shop to Scotland Road, that's been withdrawn, as you've been notified previously. Then move on to the next one, which is the erection of 4 dwellings on land to the east of Osborne Terrace in Newchurch in Pendle. Neil, is there anything you need to share with us on this one?
Chairman, just that the what you can deliberate on isn't as full as what you can for normal applications. It's an area I think government needs to give us more information on, but matters of highway detail, for example, aren't things that you can deliberate on with this. It's more the general principle of whether the site should or shouldn't be developed. So it's a different set of material considerations.
Okay, thanks for that, Neil. Who would like to kick off on this? Brian Newman.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would say on this application, I would say that it should be refused. There's a big development in Spenbrook at the moment, which is quite adequate, and this application for 4 houses could easily end up being a very large development, because it goes right around the back of the houses on Osborne Terrace. The road to it is not up to how it should be. There is an enormous amount of money will need to be spent on the road, because that itself leads to other properties. So I would like to propose that this is refused on over development.
Okay. Before I bring Ken Turner in to speak, is there a seconder for that? David, you've got your hand up. Is that to second? David Whip.
Right. I'm not sure that we've quite encapsulated the reasons for refusal appropriately, but certainly the impact on the hamlet, Watcoulter village of Newchurch, and the reasons cited in the report is that the detrimental impact on the AONB. I think they are valid reasons, and I'm not sure about the overdevelopment, but I would take Neil's advice on framing the right reasons for refusal.
Neil, do you want to help Brian and David?
Yes.
You're on mute, Neil.
Yeah, sorry, it was lagging slightly. Chairman, I think AONBs are that sensitive, and in terms of national policy, that impact on the AONB, that it's not the right form of development in that location. You can always argue that, and that's perfectly legitimate. And if that's a committee's view, we'll deal with that. It's always within the modern planning context. You shouldn't generally say there's too much development in a village unless you really have solid evidence for that. And I think to argue on those lines for 4 units will be pretty difficult to do. And as I tried to probably poorly talk about at the start, we shouldn't be looking at the highways issues because that's not the way the PIP process works. So I would suggest, if you're going along the lines of refusal, like Councillor Whip suggesting, and others, it will be that it's a wrong type of development in that location in the AONB, and I think that's a perfectly robust debate that we can have at appeal.
Okay, Brian, are you happy to have that as your reason of refusal instead of what you put forward?
Yes, I have. Thank you.
Second that.
That's fine. Thank you. Ken Turner, you've indicated to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this particular site is on a non-made-up road, and if one looks at Lancashire County Council's objections, it makes it very clear that unless the road is in fact improved quite dramatically, the County Council would be objectionable to this particular site. Whilst this application is for 4 properties, there is a watercourse that runs to the front of the property where they are currently suggesting making access onto the site, and the site itself fits in an L shape back into the main road to the far end of the town. Now, the village itself, this will probably be little more than a start to what else could be construed at a later stage to extend the development in total. And as an area of outstanding natural beauty, and it is an area of beauty, it is not compatible in the location where it is facing the sewage works. And also, of course, there is another small develop farther along on this road that vehicles have to use a dirt track for access there and there back. Now, as a consequence of this, if this is approved, it will simply be the starting point for a far greater application to come at a later stage. It is uncalled for in this particular location. It is not desired in this particular location. And as Councillor Newman has already intimated, is far in excess of anything that is needed at this particular area. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thanks for that, Ken. Nobody else indicated to speak, so I've only got one proposal on the table, and that's to refuse, set out by Brian and seconded by David. So I'll call your name out, and this time you're either voting for the refusal or against the refusal or abstaining, just to make it clear. So Nadeem Ahmed. Nadeem.
For.
Thank you. Zafar. Zaf. Zaf, you're on mute. I'll come back to him. Councillor Aslam.
For.
Rosemary Carroll. Rosemary.
Sorry.
Are you for the refusal or against the refusal or abstaining?
For refusal.
Okay, thank you. Colin Carter.
For.
David Clegg,
4.
Sarah Coburn-Price,
4.
Mike Goldthorpe,
4.
Mohammed Iqbal, 4. Brian Newman.
Against.
You're against your own proposal, Brian. Brian, can I just clarify? Are you voting against your own proposal?
Yes. My proposal is against.
Yeah, that's what I'm checking. So you're voting for your proposal, or you're against your
Yeah,
own
for
proposal?
my proposal, yes.
Right, okay, thank you for
Sorry.
that clarification. Councillor Sakib?
4.
Thank you. Yvonne Tennant?
4.
Thank you. David Whip?
4.
Thank you. Zafar, have you joined us?
I have, sorry, Chairman, I got cut off there for a second. I'm voting for.
Okay, that's a unanimous decision to reject the application. That concludes the planning applications 2 hours later. So we'll move now on to the performance indicators update. Dean, are you with us?
I am, Chairman.
Welcome to the meeting, Dean. I know you've just joined us, there's no doubt. Is there anything that you need to pick up on here?
Nothing. Well, I think, Chairman, this is the performance for the last financial year, and I think if you look at paragraph 7 and 8, the council has performed reasonably well throughout last year, despite the challenges we have financially. So I think if nothing else, if members can thank the council staff for the performance, that would be really helpful.
I'm more than happy on behalf of the committee to thank all council staff and everybody below the chief executive who really work their socks off. Not saying that the chief exec doesn't, but you know, the performance is there for last year. Happy to take any comments, questions from colleagues. Councillor David Whip.
Chairman, I would second what you've said. I've been really impressed with the dedication of staff at all levels in carrying out the work in difficult circumstances, and I would sincerely endorse a thank you to go from ourselves to everybody. In terms of the performance indicator, I think, you know, we're looking at last year. It's a different world now, and I think we've got to get our heads round looking forward. So you know, we could rake over old calls, but I think we're just noting that.
Okay, Nadeem?
Yes, just echo what yourself and Councillor Whip have said in terms of the staff, and I think our staff are fantastic in terms of work that they do on a daily basis, but in terms of going forward and the challenges we're going to be facing are going to be much tougher, but I do genuinely believe with our staff and their dedication, we'll get through this together. Thank you.
Absolutely. Everybody happy to endorse that? Is there anybody that's against what's being moved? No, that's unanimous. Thank you. The strategic plan. Dean, that's you on again. I think there's an appendix here to take into account the issue around COVID-19 as well, isn't there?
Yeah, so just by way of explanation. So what we do annually is have a look at the strategic plan and refresh it accordingly for things that have happened. Clearly, the strategic plan is our longer term planning document that sets out what we seek to do over, as it suggests here, a 3-year period. So we haven't necessarily changed our strategic objectives, which remain to be delivering good services, helping to create a sustainable economy with better quality housing, helping our communities be resilient, and that's proven to be the case, I think, in recent weeks, and us being a sustainable organisation, which is from year to year becoming increasingly difficult. What we have done in relation to this and reflecting COVID-19 is add on a 5th objective, and that is based around our both response latterly, but more recently the recovery from COVID-19. And we've added that as an objective because we think it's so specific and we have to do something about it. And on the back of that, we've developed a recovery plan to deal with those particular issues that we feel need to be picked up and dealt with. So we've appended a recovery plan to the strategic plan, and we'll be grateful for comments from members.
Okay, thank you. This is a recommendation to full council anyway, so
yeah.
David?
Chairman, I'm not going to talk at length about I'll just talk about the recovery plan, but not at length. There's a lot of measures in there, some of which are general, others are quite detailed. I think it's absolutely imperative that we have a look at how we can get out of the mess that we're in. I don't think we ought to be doing that at the jeopardy of people's lives. And looking at what the government are doing at the moment, I think there's a bit of a headlong rush to open things up, which in my view is premature. But one of the items in the recovery plan is about the leisure trust facilities and the gyms and swimming pools. And I just find it utterly bizarre that on the one hand, you've got pubs reopening, but on the other hand, gyms, which are, intrinsically a lot more sanitary, if I can put it that way, aren't allowed to open. And I'm not going to make a big thing about it, but the inconsistencies of the government approach, I think, is very regrettable, and that actually long term undermines the recovery that we so desperately need, and risks people's lives in coming months. I'm happy to propose that we accept this as a recommendation to full council, where there may or may not be more discussion on it.
Okay, I'm happy to second that and just echo the points that you've made, David. But I think this is a common fact that I take part in district council leaders networks conference calls at least once a week now, and cross-party council leaders are making representation to government ministers to say, look, some of the decisions that are coming out from central government and ministers in particular are bizarre, to put it mildly. That you're right, on the one hand, we're being, or not us, but people are being encouraged to reopen pubs and things like that, yet things like gyms and what have you are not allowed to open. But, we can continue to make the noises on a national level, and we are certainly as district councils. But whether, government take those up and actually do something with them is entirely up to them. I've got Ken next. Ken?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry about that. I keep having to remember this bloody mute thing. My apologies. Yeah, can I say, I'm pleased to hear that it's going to be referred to full council, but of course, the next council meeting is July the 10th with one agenda item only, which is the combined authority. And obviously, dependent on the result of that, will have quite an impact on the proposals that are coming through with this. When do you anticipate it may be considered at full council?
I think the intention is to consider it at the next council meeting, which I think is scheduled in September, Ken, by which time things will have hopefully moved on in terms of COVID-19. So both the administration and the senior officers and hopefully councillors at that council meeting will have a clear picture of where the strategic plan is going. I think, if we were to try and come up with something today or certainly within the next month or so, generally I don't think anybody knows where we're going to be in 3 months' time. So I think September is the ideal council meeting to pick this up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I can come back to that, I'm pleased to hear there's going to be one in September, and I agree wholeheartedly with what you've said. And I just hope that some of the people in another little place down there might actually get their heads out the sand and wake up to the realisation of what is happening. And I pray to God we don't start another second wave before then.
Absolutely. Okay, everybody in agreement with that? Anybody not happy? Well, not happy, but not in agreement, please let me know. No, that's fine. The financial strategy deemed specialist subject.
Well, just to help me, Chairman, I think Vince is on the line as well.
Oh, is there?
He is.
Vince.
So just
Good afternoon, members.
Good afternoon, Vince, and welcome back to the council.
That's very kind of you, Chairman. Thank you.
Temporary basis, and it's over to you for your specialist subject, financial strategy.
Well, Chairman, I'll start this off actually. Vince can fill in the gaps, I think. So we brought this, for reasons that you're aware, we brought this just slightly later than we would really want to bring it, but it is an update of the medium-term financial plan, reflecting the fact that we set the budget back in February. In between time, of course, we've had COVID-19 and the impact of that. But nevertheless, we do need to get on and look at what next year's financial picture will look like. And so that's the purpose of this report. In relation to the report, just going through it, not necessarily page by page, just picking out the key items. Of course, looking ahead and seeing what the financial horizon looks like is quite difficult because the government is having to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic, and a lot of the things that we were expecting, like the comprehensive spending review, like local government finance reforms, all those have been deferred till next year and probably won't kick in until the year after. So it's very unclear now what kind of financial settlement councils will get with effect from April 21. So to some extent, we're guessing around that. What we have done for the purposes of this is assume that we'll get what we've got this year plus a bit of inflation. But I should stress to you that that's only my assumption, and that until we get more information from the government, then at this stage it can only be that. In terms of the outturn for last year, that's looking pretty good. We'll report to you at the July Policy and Resources Committee the final details of that, but it's looking like the revenue account will underspend by about £500,000. That's primarily staffing costs underspent, and a very good year in relation to planning applications we had. We got just over £500,000 worth of planning income, which in the time I've been here is the best year we've ever had. Just then going on to reserves and balances. One of the things I've picked out here is that, of course, we've been reporting to you on the weekly updates that we're required on a monthly basis to tell the government what the financial impact of COVID-19 will be for the council. And in my last update, we indicated that the net impact will probably be about £2.2 million for this year on the basis of our current estimates. And so I think as a finance officer, it's incumbent upon us to ensure that we've got some resource cover for that in the event that the government doesn't provide any more funding. And I say that in the context of the government talking at the moment about providing more funding. So I do expect the government will provide us with more funding, but nevertheless, we need to provide some resource cover for that. So there is a proposition in the report saying that we need to set aside some money just in case to ensure that we can cover any potential costs of COVID from our reserves, and I'll talk about that in a second. In terms of the budget strategy for the current year, then we set the budget with an increase in council tax of 1.99%. We had more budget growth than we anticipated, and we had less savings, which, if I'm honest, that's probably our norm from one year to the next. It did mean we used more reserves, but nevertheless, we had a balanced budget. Just coming on to the estimated financial impact of COVID, I think we've been clear that that is both additional costs, primarily because of the Leisure Trust, because inevitably this year we're going to have to pay more money to the Leisure Trust. So I'll warn you now, I don't know how much it is, but at some point this year we are going to have to provide more funding to the Leisure Trust. And you know the reasons for that. It's because they've been closed for the first 3 months of the year, probably longer, and it comes to Councillor Whip's point about the pressure being put on the government to allow those facilities to reopen so that we can get that income rolling again. In the meantime, we've no income and all the costs. So, as I say, we're going to be paying more money to the Leisure Trust, and we'll tell you about that in due course. So there's more costs, about 1.3 million. And of course, COVID has an impact on all of our income streams across the board, some more so than others, but particularly business rates and council tax. And those are down at the moment on the basis of what we would normally get at this time of the year. The net impact of that is £2.2 million we're forecasting for this financial year. We think we can cope with the business rates and council tax within the existing reserves we've got on collection fund. The balance I'm proposing, we set aside a £1.5 million reserve just in case we need it and just in case we don't get any more money from government. I do think we will, and if we do, then that reserve won't be needed. So that's in the report. In terms of the medium-term financial plan, really, I'll turn you to page 13 of the report. Looking ahead, the gap for the 3-year period to 2023 is about £3 million. And that's primarily because over recent years, we've been using reserves to prop up our budget as government funding has reduced. The fact is we won't have those reserves over the next 3 years to do that, so we'll have a gap of about £3 million. What we will have for next year, for 21-22, is a gap of £1 million, and that needs to be the focus now of our work between now and setting the budget in February, is to identify how we're going to save £1 million out of what we spend, or whether we can generate more income. That's the kind of headlines in terms of the report. Happy to take any questions. Vince, do you want to add anything to that?
Sorry, it just takes a second to get off mute. No, there's nothing I'd like to add at this stage, Chairman. I think all the main points have been covered there by Dean. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Vince and Dean. David, you wanted to come in, David Whip?
Yes, Chairman. I'd like to start with the positive, because it's really good news. The indications are that we saved £500,000 last year, and that in any normal circumstances would have been a big boost to building a balanced budget for the current year. So I think thanks are due to all the staff who have helped with that saving, in-year saving. We don't know the absolute final figure, but we'll get that in due course. That's really significant. It does help, and it's a building block for the future. However, the cost of COVID, not only measured in people's lives, but in terms of the financial cost to this council, is very significant indeed. And I hope that the government will come through with the funding that they did promise, and that the whole of the costs of COVID will be covered. If they aren't, then we will have some very significant cuts that will need to be implemented to make ends meet and to create a balanced budget. I'm reluctant. Mr. Langton is suggesting there that we should have a £1.5 million reserve, just in case the government don't come up with a cash. I think it's something. Yeah, we need to be aware that that's a possibility, but I think there needs to be a very firm statement to government that, look, you know, this is what it has cost, and you do need to cover those issues. Looking beyond that, and clearly if we don't get the government funding, then we will have a very acute financial crisis, which will mean that we can't sustain the services that we currently have and people appreciate here in Pendle, and we need to look at that. Even if COVID is covered, then because of the position with reserves running down and the government funding having been withdrawn previously, then we've still got huge pressure. And it's the same message as we've had in previous years. We need to keep a grip on the spending, make savings where we can, and I think the recommendations in the report we ought to embrace. I particularly thanked all the members of the budget scrutiny, the working group that we set up last year, because we had cross-party support for most of the proposals that we agreed, and I think that paid dividends in the end. So I'd like very much to see us carrying on with that way of working, and I'd like to be able to see us having a balanced budget. I'd like to see us having a balanced budget with full funding from the government for COVID, and I'd like to see some certainty, but at a time when the very existence of Pendle Council is uncertain in the years to come, I don't think we're going to get much certainty on anything really. So I would move the report, Chairman. As I say, I've got a question mark about the £1.5 million reserve, but I think the rest of the report I would embrace.
Okay, I'm happy to second that, and I think echo most of the points that you've raised there, David. But I think one thing that we were clear as a council when COVID-19, the lockdown happened back in March, was that we as a council wouldn't abandon our residents. And, you know, I think credit goes to Dean and all the staff in terms of making sure that we as a council responded to whatever needs wholly what our residents required. And, you know, that's reflected, I think, in some of the positive feedback that I've had from residents who traditionally may, well, we've got it wrong, we hold our hand up and say we've got something wrong. But I think over the last 3 months, this council certainly has been recognised by a lot of people as stepping up to the mark and helping them. And I think that was a conscious decision as a council to say that we won't abandon people. You know, we could have quite legitimately said, you know what, we haven't got any money, or we've got very little money, we've got very limited resources, and we're just going to go into our shell. But by setting up things like the Community Support Hub, I think has really demonstrated the resilience that this council and our staff have got, and certainly the people of Pendle. But let's not just beat about the bush. We've had as a council 10 years of cuts from this government, and the one thing that worries me now, is that when the lockdown happened, the minister stood up and said, you know what, whatever costs you incur as councils, we as the government will reimburse. So that was music to the ears of council leaders, which thought, you know what, governments are on the side of everybody. But as the weeks have developed, it's now getting to a stage, and, you know, I know we're not here to talk about the combined authority, but, you know, at Lancashire leaders, there's a real worry that the recovery of areas like ours now will be linked to this carrot and stick approach that, you know, if we do as what governments say in terms of local government reorganisation, maybe we'll get some more money. If we don't, God knows what's going to happen. But I think by setting up this reserve fund sends two messages. One, to the government to say, look, despite us being a small district council, we're still prepared to put our money where our mouth is. And that's, as I said earlier, is not to abandon our residents. But rightly, the government should be reimbursing us at some point in the near future for all the costs that we've incurred. We never decided to close the Leisure Trust services. It was government that instructed us. And I don't understand why the people of Pendle should then have to pay out to the Leisure Trust a significant amount of money simply to keep leisure services going. Because what's the alternative? If the government potentially had its way, and the messages that I'm picking up is that they would say, right, okay, you know, close all your leisure centres, and I don't think anybody on this council, irrespective of their political persuasion, would support that. So I'm certainly looking forward to clearly lobbying on behalf of the council, and Dean is as well, to say to government, look, whatever penny we've spent and whatever income we've lost, you said you would reimburse us, and you should do that. If they don't, there's a clear message for the people of Pendle that this council will still not abandon you, but we haven't got a bottomless pit, as Dean always reminds us. And if things continue as they are, there may come a point in the near future where, as a council or as a group of councillors, we have to make some really tough decisions. I don't want to make those tough decisions where we say, look, we're closing services, or we're not going to provide this service because we were shortchanged by the government. So it's not a political point that I'm making, it's a factual point. We should be reimbursed for whatever money we've spent and whatever costs we've lost out, because you've seen on the BBC this morning that a lot of councils far bigger than ours are clearly facing bankruptcy. Now, if they're facing bankruptcy, what hope is there for small district councils like ours? So, you know, we'll continue to lobby government through Andrew Stevenson, our Member of Parliament, raise it directly with ministers at whatever levels we can to say that, look, you need to have a fair deal for councils like ours. We haven't got that source of income where we can just fall back on and rely on. So happy to endorse what's been said so far, and happy to support the recommendations. I've got Nadeem wanting to speak next. Nadeem?
Yeah, I think the challenges ahead are quite clear. I mean, we've had challenges of previous numerous years where we hear each year when we're setting the budget in terms of the shortfall we're facing and the tough decisions we as councillors are to make. But year on year, them decisions, let's be honest, have got tougher and tougher. And in the future, it seems like them decisions are going to get even more tougher, unfortunately. But I think in terms of the general points, in terms of the funding from central government, I think there are positives. There has been huge, significant investment which we've had to help our local businesses and trying to keep people into employment. But I want to be honest and straightforward, but more needs to be done in terms of helping councils like ourselves. And I'm happy to work with the other group leaders to lobby on behalf of the council and try and make sure we do get our fair share of the money. I mean, I understand some of the arguments in terms of our leisure centres and why they're closed. I mean, it's difficult because whatever the government decisions they make, it's going to be people going to be arguing on both sides, depending on what the outcome is. And I'm hoping, like all of us, that there isn't another outbreak, and we can try and to bring some normality back to our businesses, our leisure centres, and people can continue, and we can try and get through this difficult period. But it's not going to be easy. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Nadeem. Ken?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I listened to what you say, and I agree wholeheartedly with what you said. But when Birmingham and other authorities like that are suggesting 114, and the government have to spend our money, I wonder how much will actually come to authorities like ourselves, and how much will be diverted to more choosing of authorities for it to go to. I think that we have an immense problem facing us in the future. Could I ask, have we looked and analysed what are our basic fundamental necessities that we have to offer, just in case we're going to have to look at it when next year's budget comes round? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Just before I bring Brian in response to your question there, Ken, one of your former colleagues previously raised this a few years ago to say, look, what are the core services that the council can provide? And we worked on a cost rationale basis. But I mean, my view is clear that as far as I'm concerned, every service this council provides is necessary for our residents. I don't want to be in the game of saying, let's have a Ryanair and EasyJet service where we simply collect the bins and anything else we have to pay for. And I don't think the people of this borough realise what a Section 114 notice would entail. You know, most people will think that, yeah, what's one of them? The government will come in and step in and run services. Well, you know, they'll come in and run services, but you won't have 3 leisure centres. You will not have a lot of services that this council, historically, over all political persuasions, has provided. You'll go down to the bare basic service that legal has to be provided, and that's not what I came into politics for, as no doubt none of us did. I've got Brian.
Can I just say I agree wholeheartedly with what you just said, and I hope it doesn't ever happen.
I like this, Ken, where you're agreeing with me everything today. Brian Newman, you indicated to speak. Brian? Brian? No, I think he's lowered his hand anyway. Okay, is there anybody else that's...
I think he's on mute.
Brian, I'll give you a few seconds if you want to unmute. No. Okay, so we've got the recommendation moved and seconded by Councillor David Whip and myself with support from Nadeem. Everybody in favour, I take it. If anybody's against, speak now.
Can you hear me, Chair?
I can hear you now, Brian.
Right, I'm sorry about that. This keeps going on. Right, I'd just like to thank Pendle Council for the great effort they've made in this COVID epidemic that we've been through, and also all the voluntary committees that's really pulled the community together. I think it's been a great achievement for Pendle. We've done absolutely marvellous to get through this phase of it. I'm not saying we've finished, but the people out there of Pendle have been absolutely great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Brian, well said there. Okay, and the last item is the tenders, which I'm happy to move that we just note. Anybody disagrees, let me know. No. And that concludes this meeting, ladies and gentlemen. Can I thank you all for your patience and contributions this afternoon? And take care, and we'll see you again very soon. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you.